If you're looking for a family SUV and you want to stand out in the car park, well, you've got plenty of great choices to choose from. You've got stuff from Audi, Mercedes and Land Rover, but there's one that stands out for the drivers amongst us, and that is the BMW X3. And this just so happens to be the all-new one, but that does leave me a little concerned because they've changed it completely. So have they ruined it? Starting from £48,000, this new X3 is similarly priced and similarly sized to cars like the Audi Q5, the Mercedes GLC, and it used to be able to call the Jaguar F-Pace a rival, but Jag won't sell you a new one of those anymore. Although we at Cinch will, and of course we'll sell you all the other SUVs as well. Just download our app or visit our website or come to one of our stores to see what we've got. If you must have a new X3, at least you'll be getting more car for your money because this new one is longer, wider, and a little bit shorter actually, and that's because it's slightly sportier in its design. But the biggest inspiration for its design actually comes from the X1. Now we've got these X1-esque headlights here with these cool LED lights, and we've also got a slightly more butch bonnet. It's a lot more horizontal, so it gives the car more of an SUV stance. And yes, we are going to be talking about these grills, but dare I say it, because they're slightly less oblong and therefore less Bugs Bunny, I don't mind them so much, but they do come with this illuminated surrounds here, which, well, yeah, I'll let you decide. Now, you've probably noticed that this X3 has whacking great 21-inch alloy wheels and also some pretty beefy brake calipers as well. And that's because it's the M50 model, which means it's got a 6-cylinder engine under the bonnet. I'm going to explain in a little bit why I think that is a fantastic thing. But if you want a slightly more sensible model, well, they do also offer a petrol, which is a 4-cylinder, and also a diesel, also a 4-cylinder. And well, if you go for those, you won't get the fancy wheels, but you will still fundamentally get the same slab of X3. You'll get these big chunky doors and your roof racks as well. So it's a sensible car no matter what you go for, but when you come around the back of this M50, well then that's when you see why this car earns its M badge stripes. Around the back here, we don't just have 1 or 2 or even 3 exhaust tips, we've got 4, which, well, that's quite a lot for a shopping trolley, isn't it? Although this one does have a turbocharged straight-six engine, but more importantly, for that family duty stuff, it's good to know not only is the back design quite nice, I like the taillights and I like the simple boot design as well, but inside, you've got a lot of space. Now, this is not class leading. The GLC does beat it and quite comfortably as well. But compared to the other cars, this has got a good amount of length and a good amount of width. And overall, even when you fold down the rear seats, it does a very good impression of a van. But I'm quite disappointed to find that if I lift up the floor, there isn't loads of underfloor storage given how much mass there is down here. And I can't figure out why it is, but effectively, you've only got enough space here for some netting in this case, and then you've got a spare wheel well, which in the UK is almost always empty. So that's a minor disappointment, but overall it's usable. Although the biggest change for this car, and especially in the way it feels from behind the wheel, is in that bit there. So let's hop inside so I can show you. Now, when you get to the rear door, obviously as a family car, you're hoping this will open nice and wide to give you loads of access for a pram or a baby seat. But actually what you'll notice is firstly, this door, the aperture is not particularly wide, and secondly, this is a really chunky door. It looks really strong and really tough, but if you're trying to squeeze, especially when you parked close to another car and you're trying to squeeze your kids in, it might be a little bit troublesome. I mean, that's a thick door. Gives a feeling of quality though, doesn't it? Although, then you grab some of the plastics and you reach down to close the door and you feel this hard touch plastic with this kind of hard lip here as well. And then you look ahead of you and you're like, wait a minute, this is really hard and scratchy plastic as well. Don't get me wrong, this is going to be tough and it's going to be strong for kids kicking away. But in a BMW that costs over 60 grand in M trim, that doesn't feel right. At least thanks to this BMW X3 having grown in length, we now have a lot of legroom. I mean, the old one was plenty spaceful, but this one has even more space for my feet and my knees. And even my head has generous amounts of room above it, thanks in part to this car's extended panoramic sunroof. And I have to say that storage is good here. Now we've got nets down here, which doesn't feel particularly high quality, but they work. And the door bins are really generous. I mean, those keep cup sizes in there. You can get US style ones easily. And if you want to get into the boot, well, firstly, actually, I should show you that you can put some cups into here. But if you want to get into the boot, well, it's as simple as just lifting this lever here, pulling this down, going like that, and then you have a ski hatch as well. So that's a nice practical setup. And this middle seat as well is quite wide. Now, probably going to be a squeeze for 3 adults, but for 3 kids, it's going to be no problems whatsoever. And that helps to kind of eliminate one of the issues in this cabin, which is the big chunky tunnel through the floor here. Now it's forgivable because it's an all-wheel drive car, so there's a drive shaft going through there, but it does mean that you're gonna have to twist your feet to get through if you're sliding across. And that brings me to the screen down here. And that is where you control your heater and your fan. Now, I would have much preferred buttons, but there is an advantage, I guess, to this, which is that it will work easily in the night. You won't have to have illuminated buttons, you can see it clear. And also, you're not gonna accidentally kick the switches with your shoes. And also, there's an interesting thing in the back of this car, which is this unique dial here. It's really weird. It's like a manual control to control your vents. It's weird because it's the only one in the whole car. Now, I mentioned that there was only one of those manual heater vent control-y thingies in the back, and that's because in the front, there are none. And honestly, this is crazy. BMW has got rid of something that's featured in cars from forever. And that's because they've switched to these touch-sensitive ones. Now, they're gonna tell us that it's because of design and it just looks really cool. But actually, I think it's a little bit of cost saving going on here, because in fact, this whole interface here is just one touch-sensitive module. And actually, all the other buttons in the car, while they are buttons, so that should be celebrated, they're on rocker switches. So everything is a little bit, well, less tactile. And the same goes for the ones up here. Although I guess I should be thankful they're still technically buttons. And there is something to be celebrated, because the UX designers have kept the iDrive rotary control down here, which is so much more tactile. You can use the touchscreen here, and it is a fast reacting screen. This is just so much easier on the go. You can move around with it and select as well. The touchscreen itself, as I said, is nice and reactive, and actually it's simple to use until you dive into the apps, and there are so many. It's a little bit too complicated to go into right now, but just know that for most of us, you're either just going to use the built-in sat-nav, and it's definitely worth doing that, by the way, because you get a cool augmented reality display in there, but you're also probably just going to dive into Android Auto and Apple CarPlay, which are wireless in this car, as you'd expect. And of course, because this screen is so wide, it means the map is actually nice and clear, so it's easy to use. And you can use the BMW voice control. There we go. No thanks, Beamer, but I still find this knob down here the best to use. Elsewhere in the cabin, now there is a big improvement versus the back of the car, and that is that a lot of the hard touch plastics that were very prevalent over there are not so much here. They are there, especially down low, and you can find them, but mostly up top the materials get nicer. And even this door pulley here, this bit down here, has a shiny black plastic in this M50 model. Although we did have a peek in a lower spec car, it's not as nice as that when you go for a cheaper version. But the seats and general fit and finish and quality is nice, although it's not going to be up to the standard of the old BMWs that many of us came to love. No thanks, Beamer. Storage room, good. I mean, there's enough space down here to throw probably a small handbag in there, although it's not quite as deep as some EVs, not surprising. You've got some cup holders here. In fact, I can demonstrate the space. We've got our normal size cup in here. That goes in, no problems whatsoever. And you've also got a wireless charging mat along with 2 USB-Cs, which double the amount we have in the whole car. The glove box is annoyingly small, but by contrast, yeah, that's really small, isn't it? But by contrast, we've got gigantic door bins. I mean, you can get another US style bottle in there and, well, plenty of other things as well. So overall, it's a functional interior that leaves a lot to be desired when it comes to materials and finish, but this is a BMW, so surely it's going to win back my affections on the road. Now, getting behind the wheel of this X3 and driving onto a classic potholed British road, I was expecting, especially with those big wheels, to feel like this car is quite fidgety, but the refinement is very good. In fact, the thing that stands out straight away is just how BMW it feels. The ride is good. Oh, if you say BMW though, it interrupts you. No thanks, BMW, I'm talking to camera. When you first get in it, you notice that this Beamer is actually lovely and refined. The ride is very good. And now we do have standard adaptive dampers on this top M50 model. That isn't the case on lower cars, but it does ensure that over cat's eyes, over drain covers, and just over the rubbish we have in the UK, this is actually a very comfortable car. Where you really notice that this is a proper BMW though, because of that 6-cylinder engine, is how silky smooth it is. All this motor and this ZF 8-speed gearbox, they've been together a lot of times now. Plenty of cars use this setup, and now with the mild hybrid tech as well, just adding a little bit of extra torque. Well, not only is it nice and effortless, not only does everything feel really smooth, but also it's just so refined, but yet you still get a lovely silky engine note. And well, doesn't matter to many people, but to me, whew, that's a nice noise. And that smoothness, even though this is a near 400 horsepower car, and so you'd expect the smoothness to be useful at speed, but it's also very useful in town or in beautiful little Cotswold villages, because it makes your driving so much more effortless. If I'm just coming to a gradual acceleration here, the gears are changing. I can hear it changing gear in the background, but I'm not really feeling it. It's all just this lovely linear delivery of power. So I think this is probably the most refined 6-cylinder powertrain you can get in this class of car. And that might be music to ears of people who are used to those silky smooth diesels that we used to get in cars like this, but BMW is not offering a high performance diesel variant of the X3 anymore. You can get a 4-cylinder, but if you want to go quick and you want diesel, well then you have to look to the likes of Audi with their TDI SQ5. But you know what? It makes sense. I get why they've stuck with the petrol, because now mild hybrid tech ensures that it is actually quite efficient. This is a car that can definitely go around corners like something lighter, but because it's not a full red-blooded M machine, it is still a little bit leany. It doesn't completely hunker down, but what it does do, and does do really well, is it juggles the power between front and rear axles. You can only get X3s in xDrive form, so it's nothing unique to this M50, but because we've got all that torque, nearly 600 Newton meters of the stuff, it means in front of the car, pulling me out of the bend, and if I get on the accelerator really aggressively and I tell the electronics I want to have some fun, well then I can also get the car to kick up a little bit of oversteer as well. Not a lot, but it's definitely enough to make you giggle. That said, the X3, even in potent M50 form, isn't as good at convincing you it's a sports car as the Porsche Macan, because the controls aren't communicative enough and the suspension isn't fully dialed in for maximum agility. The steering's quick and the brakes are strong, and you do get some lovely shift paddles to make manual shifts more engaging, but it's clear this M50 is an M-tuned model, not a red-blooded M-division car. Now, as I mentioned in the interior bit, well, there are a lot of touch-sensitive buttons in this car, and mostly you get used to them and you can sort of forgive them even if they're not the most tactile. But one that is very, very annoying, especially in the M50, is the fact that the My Modes button, the button that changes the drive modes, is amongst those touch-sensitive buttons, or at least it's on the rocker, so it's very hard to figure out where it is. I can't just put my hand down like this, like you might have done in an older BMW. I have to look down, take my eyes off the road, and then figure out where it is, and then I have to go into the modes in the screen and choose the one I want. And handily, I mean, Sport is only the second one along, so you're only going to have a second. But if you want one of the other modes, of which most of them are going to be completely pointless, I mean, what is digital art mode? Well, then it's just all this time with your eyes off the road. And if you're anything like me, and sometimes you just arrive at a roundabout, or more importantly, you arrive at fun twisty B road, you want to hit Sport straight away and enjoy those corners, even if they only last for 5 seconds. But in this car, by the time you've figured it all out, you're probably through them already. It's an annoying feature. All right, let's see how quick it is off the line. This is a 4.7 to 62 car, 4.7 seconds. Let's see if it does it. Right, foot to the floor. Oh. And that's 60. Yeah, it's quite a violent experience. I mean, that electric shove you get initially is really, really cool. And then when you change gear, there's a noticeable thump. It's not holding you back. It's it's almost a surge of torque. I think the electric mild hybrid system basically kicks you up the backside. As fun as a 0 to 60 launches, most M50 owners, like most X3 owners, are probably going to drive their SUV in a more sensible manner. And handily, going for this top grade 6-cylinder model has advantages for that too. As I said, everything's really smooth, but what actually is most impressive is the start-stop technology. And you might be thinking, start-stop impressive? No thanks. Honestly, when you've got a starter generator in a proper mild hybrid system like this car, I can demonstrate now as I come to a stop, and I'll let this gentleman go. Off you go, sir. Engine is off, and as he pulls away, engine starts. I didn't even notice it start. I just know it did because I could see on the rev counter it went from nothing to something. So it's really smooth, very refined. To potter around in this car, even in this big wheeled and more aggressive M50, such a lovely thing to drive, and it doesn't actually feel as big on the road as you might expect. And I think partly that's because the seating position is relatively high, although it is very comfortable in the surroundings I have here. But I still can see over this big butch bonnet, and I can see those chunky door mirrors. It's very easy to position the car, and the reversing cameras too, I must say, are nice and sharp. So it's clear that this X3, now that it's bigger, offers the practicality and interior space of a bigger and more expensive car. But that has come at a cost, and that is the materials and the finish in the cabin. It feels like it comes from a cheaper car, and certainly not one befitting of that BMW badge. Of course, there are plenty of things to keep most buyers happy. The screens are very good, and that ambient lighting is lovely as well. But if you've had BMWs of old, you might find the cabin in this one a little bit on the rough side. Which is why I'd recommend you go for the M50 because of that lovely silky engine. Plus, you get more exhaust tips for your money. Although if money and well, practicality is your priority, there is a car out there that does most of what this does, but for less money, and it actually has more space too, because that is the Honda CR-V. And our review of it is here, and you're gonna wanna check out the weird rear doors.